Joy. This is Seven Seas Cruising Association, and Joy Clary is our host tonight, and this is on spearfishing, fishing, and pelagic fish. And I'll turn this over to you, Joy.
Hi, good evening. Glad to have everybody here. Just wanted to announce or introduce our Seven Seas Cruising Association for a moment. We are putting on these webinars for all different kinds of subjects, and really enjoy this. And can we go to the next slide? And so Seven Seas has been around for 70 years, started in San Diego 70 years ago, almost 70 years ago. And it was a real small group of people that started it with an idea that they just needed to get information out to other cruisers. Of course, 70 years ago is long before we had YouTubes and webinars and internet and all that. So they put together a bulletin written by people who sailed around to different places, and thereby disseminating this bulletin to a membership that grew over the years. I myself became a member 36 years ago, and we used to get that bulletin every month, and I absolutely could not wait for that thing to come. It was just in type. There was no pictures, no nothing like that, but even what the people wrote just got me so crazy about going cruising, and so I ended up spending almost the rest of my life until now cruising around the world. We've circumnavigated, so that's what it did for me, and I hope that it can do the same for you. We could still continue our major philosophy is the clean wake, which we'll talk about maybe a little bit later. And I'd like to introduce our speaker tonight, Dan Byrne, aka Adventure Man Dan. I learned about Adventure Man Dan on our Seven Seas Cruising Association Facebook page. He posts frequently about his exploits down in Bahamas and Florida right now, where he's pretty much at right now. And he's an expert spear fisherman, and I thought maybe people would like to know about spear fishing and equipment and that sort of thing, and got the guy who pretty much knows quite a bit about it. Dan's also a member of Seven Seas Cruising Association, and we're very glad to have him here. So Dan, go ahead.
Joy, thank you so much for that introduction. Really appreciate it. And I actually got to learn a few things on that. I didn't know you've been with the club for so long. Congratulations. That is a long while, and congratulations on a circumnavigation. That's awesome. So yes, as Joy was saying, I am a spear fisherman. I've traveled around the world. To list a few places off, sort of in order, I started out in Central California back, I think, in about 2013. Since then, I've gone to Northern California, Southern California. Each one of those is a different region with a different sort of species set in the water. The water temperature often is what the difference is in what species of fish are found there. After California, I started going into Baja, the Sea of Cortez, then over to the Pacific side of Baja, and that kind of opened my eyes to the international possibilities of spearfishing. So I took off on what was supposed to be 6 months with a backpack and a big sport tube of spearfishing equipment. I went to New Zealand, and I was there for 5 months, so almost over my my allotted time. And I just said, you know what, sell everything back home. I gave them all a call, said, you know, sell anything that is not nailed down. I'm just going to keep going. And yeah, I traveled on to Australia for some time, and then into South Africa. And at that point, I had been traveling for 14 months straight. Had spearfished, countless new species, including, you know, all my personal records were there. You know, New Zealand and Australia and South Africa. And by the time I got back to the United States, I had already decided that I was going to spearfish the whole West Coast. So with an RV, I drove from San Diego, California, all the way up the coast to Alaska, where I actually ended up spearfishing the king salmon world record that I still hold. That was kind of like the purpose for the trip, which having that goal ahead of time allowed me to, it put me in the way, put me in the path of a lot of opportunities, a lot of interesting things that happened along the way. So that was really great. But while I was there in Alaska, I was using a kayak. Every day I was paddling like 20 miles or something like that, just killing myself, and I couldn't even get to where I wanted to. So it just kind of dawned on me I needed a boat. I needed a big boat. And that's where my first sort of idea of a sailboat came in. I went back to Santa Cruz, California, saved up, learned how to sail at the Santa Cruz Yacht Club along with the help of a mentor. And since then, I've been able to, go down the whole east coast of the U.S. from sailing from Cape Cod all the way down into the Florida Keys, Dry Tortugas, then back out into the Bahamas. Spearfishing a little bit in Florida, but then once I got to the Bahamas, I was a little bit more competent of a sailor, and at that point I could focus back again on spearfishing. And boy, did I had a lot of fun, speared a lot of new species for myself. It was a really good time. I really enjoyed it. Came back over there, and since then, I've been going back and forth. I managed to make it out to the Bahamas this past summer. Got to have some interesting experiences, which will come up in some of the slides later. So yeah, so I've been able to get this interesting perspective on spearfishing, where it's not just something I go and do on the weekends. It's usually I'll spend months. Right now, I haven't spearfished for a couple months, but when I do go out, that's when I go out and I try to live off of the ocean. And particularly for this seminar, I'm kind of focusing on spearfishing as it relates to hopefully mostly sailors, but I know there's some motorboat cruisers out there as well. We love you all. But being able to spearfish off your sailboat, well, the sailboat gets you to the most remote places, and then with your dinghy, you're able to really take advantage of it. So that's a bit of my background on spearfishing. So for the purpose of the seminar, and I've written a guide, which I will be sending out to everybody who would like one. And it's just a short introduction to spearfishing to give you it from the basics, from the ground up. I'm going to break this down into 10 parts: ocean competency, free diving, fishing rules and regulations, spear gear, finding a good spearfishing spot. We all know you guys want to know where I go. Getting to your dive site, actually spearing the fish, and what I call ocean foraging. The methods and styles of spearfishing. There's different ways you can actually go out and hunt. Ocean to table, how you actually cook and eat your fish. And then lastly, the lifestyle of spearfishing, bit of a closure and kind of how I view spearfishing. So we'll kind of get right into it. Ocean competency, and I will start up on some screen sharing and some slides. So bear with me if I'm not 100% on this one, as I still am getting used to Zoom. There we go. All right, so there we go. Ocean competency. As sailors, you guys are all pretty familiar with the ocean, but as I've come to learn from my fellow sailors, not everybody is automatically a good swimmer. That is going to be your building block to go out and spear a fish. You need to be able to survive on your own without a fin, without life preservers, just you, your body, swimming out in the ocean. Go do laps at your local pool, then work your way up to the beach on a calm day, then work your way up yet again to the beach on a little bit of a more weather day. And really, if you want to go out spearfishing, I would recommend being able to swim, not fast, but sort of at a marathon pace, about a mile. And that might sound like a lot, but if you take your time, do a side stroke, it's not that bad. So learning a little bit of ocean competency so you can survive what's out there. And just real quick, make sure my technical side's working. Joy, can you nod your head if I am showing a slide from South Africa? All right, we are working here. So anyway, yeah, so this is South Africa. Obviously, to get to this spot, I had to traverse, well, quite a bit. And you learn a lot by doing it. You learn to time the ocean. You learn when the waves are coming. And you really, I mean, many of you know I'm one of the younger cruisers out there. I just turned 29. But you don't need a tremendous amount of strength or athleticism really to do this. Some of the best spearfishers I've ever dove with around the world, they were in their 60s and their 70s even, and they were killing it, figuratively and literally. So just a little bit of an idea there. Here's obviously a shot of me in California where, yeah, I mean, if I had timed that wrong, if I had gotten it at the wrong time or really the wrong spot, it spells death and disaster. So you want to be careful. Here's in New Zealand where I didn't time it right. And you can see my my funny face I get to make along the way. And there are different things you're going to want to be able to take out with you. In this case, I'm using a paddleboard to go spearfishing. You can see it's raining and there was a ton of wind that day, but if you're comfortable out in the ocean, it's really not a problem. So moving on to the next sort of area would be free diving. Free diving, and I'm only going to lightly touch on this topic because there are experts you can go and talk to. I'm not a free diving expert at all. You can be licensed and become an instructor yourself. There are courses with it. I highly recommend, and I think many of you know him, with Evolve Freediving. I believe the guy's name's Ren. hear tremendous things about him. I plan on taking his course later. I simply haven't gotten around to it, but freediving is the act of going underwater while holding your breath. That's as simple as it comes down to. No tanks, and no hookah line, no rebreather, no cheats. It's just you and the water. Believe it or not, we as humans are very well adapted to this. And when you go underwater, especially with a little bit colder water, and the water gets on your face, it triggers what's known as the mammalian reflex, which slows your heart rate, gets you to be a little bit more relaxed. It allows your body to kind of accept where you are in a good way. And that's what lets your body, I guess, stay down longer, if that makes sense. Now, free diving also means proper form while you're underneath the water. That means clearing your ears. And most people, you'll see, I have to do it. Most people have to do this. You pinch your nose, you blow out a little bit, and you put outward pressure on your ears as you descend deeper and deeper down. Again, you guys, this is, I'm only going to lightly touch on this. I highly recommend you do your own research, because this is the dangerous part of spearfishing. It's not the sharks. It's not even the propellers. It's what's known as a shallow water blackout. And that's where you dive down and you've done your spearfishing or whatever, and you're coming back up. Maybe you took too long on the bottom. Maybe you got a little tangled on your way up, whatever it is, but you overexert yourself. If the surface is here, most people black out about, I think most drownings occur actually at about the 10-foot to the surface mark. So they black out right about there, or they black out right when they hit the surface as they exhale and then take in a big breath. And again, I'm not an expert, so I can't go over the science of this right now, but basically they black out and face down in the water. One of the biggest rules of freediving and thereby of spearfishing is to dive with a partner. For spearfishing, it also helps tremendously for actually getting the fish. If you spear a fish and maybe the spear tears out, boom, buddy can be there right on it. If you spear a fish and a shark comes around, your buddy can kind of put his presence in the way, if they like you enough, you know. But anyway, so for freediving, you'd be sitting at there, you'd be laying at the surface with your face down in the water. A snorkel comes out of your mouth and that goes up over your head, and you're using that to breathe in and out. It's called tidal breathing. It's very relaxing. It's very meditative, and it's a big reason why I go spearfishing, actually. So you're doing that until your body feels well oxygenated enough, and then you're gonna do a duck dive down. And there's all sorts of proper form with that and everything else, but for the time being, you go down and you're only using your feet. You're only kicking with just your feet. That's all you do. So that's a little bit about freediving. The next thing I wanna move on to is fishing rules and regulations. Now, again, you guys, I'm doing this in order of what I consider to be the steps to successfully go spearfishing. I'm not doing this in the order of, anything else. So first, you got to be good in the ocean. You just be able to swim out there. Next, you got to be able to dive under to be able to actually get to most of the fish species. Some fish species might not be that far down either. It really varies. Mahi-mahi, they're at the surface. Nobody's ever dove 50 feet for mahi-mahi. They're always at the surface, but generally speaking. So here's a shot from me. This is when I was in, actually, Marathon, Florida. Right here, I've got a yellowjack, amazing sashimi, absolutely delicious. I can't tell because I can't see the spots on this. I believe that's a Cero mackerel, or that could be its close cousin. I believe that's a squirrelfish, and then you have a gray triggerfish there. Ahead of time, I had gone through and I looked up all the rules and regulation on this. But for the sake of time and whatnot, I've decided to kind of put together a little bit of a list for you guys of some key things to think about when you go to a new area. So as I've traveled around the world spearfishing, I get to an area, and usually even before then, I look up the rules and regulations. You can simply Google, New Zealand fishing rules and regulations, or a lot of times it'll be sport fishing or ocean sport fishing rules and regulations, but they're all pretty much the same idea. They care about a few basic principles. First would be the species. There's some species you simply can't spear. In California, black sea bass, which is actually a grouper. In Florida, Goliath grouper. In New Zealand, queen grouper. A lot of grouper on this list. And so on. There's a lot of fish out there that maybe they're too dumb, maybe they're endangered. Whatever the case is, you simply cannot spearfish them. And you need to know these ones. If you break any of these laws, you get in a lot of trouble and it'll ruin your whole trip. So generally what the rules and regulations care about is the size of the fish, how big it is. It needs to be a minimum size. That usually denotes it being mature enough to then reproduce. So that way you're not breaking the cycle of the fish. You're not killing the babies effectively. You're letting them get to a size where they would have been able to breed once at least, and then you're harvesting them. So they're continuing their genes, they're continuing, you know, the cycle. And occasionally you will find places that have what's known as a slot limit. I know snook here in Florida, and I know Alaska for non-residents, and I believe residents as well in Alaska, where if it's too big, you can't keep it, and if it's too small, you can't keep it. Real pain in the butt, but you cannot argue with these things. So size, the species, the season, and this goes for not just spearfishing, but for, say, lobster. I always double check before I go over, but I'm going to be going to the Bahamas soon, and I believe lobster season is done in, I believe May is the end of lobster season in the Bahamas, and that's very important. No, you do not want to get caught with a single lobster after that point. The quantity that you take would be the other really big one, and that also kind of goes towards the conservation side of being a spearfisherman or spearfisher woman. We can be very selective, so don't take more than you need. Very simple. Sometimes your residency might have something to do with it. Locals of the region often can take more than non-locals, just kind of how it goes. And then the location you're in, sometimes it is a very sharp line, and there is I mean 10 feet this way, 10 feet that way is the determination of if you go to jail and they take your boat. It is that serious. I know in California, I've dove places where I knew exactly where the line was, and I stayed probably a couple hundred feet from it, but I knew guys that would dive right up against that line. So you really got to know that. Most places are not going to be marked. It's up to you to use GPS, use natural formations, whatever you got to do. And the last restriction you might find in certain places is gear. The Bahamas is the most obvious note to this. No spear guns. No spear guns in the Bahamas. Specifically, you're not allowed to use a triggered spearfishing device. A pole spear and a Hawaiian sling are good examples of ones that aren't, and I'll go over that later. So actually, I'll go over that next. That's the spearfishing side next. So spearfishing comes in many different forms as far as what you actually want to use. This is the loadout that I took with me around the world. So I'll kind of just go through everything, because this really is, it's not necessarily your bare essentials, but it's everything I needed. With this setup, I was able to take virtually any fish I came across. So the things you really need most, and only things you really need, is a mask and snorkel and a spear. Spearfishing is a super primitive way to fish. You don't need fancy gear. Obviously, I have the gear, and you can see some of it's rusting, or you can see my teak is pretty worn and stuff. But you don't need the latest and greatest. It really is much more about the Indian and not the arrow. So after you get a mask and snorkel, and a good mask is one with a blacked out lip. You do not want a clear lip, and I can go into that another time. Your snorkel should be a flexible snorkel. It shouldn't be one with fancy doodads on it that keep the water out. That's nonsense. You need to get good with, effectively when you're at the surface, you just breathe all your air out at once, and that'll eject the water out. There's a few other forms you can use to do that, but anyway. So those are the two basics. Depending where you're spearfishing, you may need a wetsuit. You can use whatever keeps you warm. If you are shivering in the water, it will make it very difficult to free dive because it'll be using extra oxygen. So the proper wetsuit is great. They make specific wetsuits for spearfishing, and they do make a difference for colder climates. And remember, I have spearfished Alaska for quite some time. And yeah, having the right wetsuit can make or break a lot. Moving on from there, fins. Fins comes in all shapes and sizes. I use these very large, and still do. I still use these to this day. These are carbon fiber with special boots and this and that, and they were like $500 used and all this stuff. You don't need anything that fancy, but obviously I try to do this to a little bit more of an extreme extent. But regular fins will work just fine, or you can get fins that are made out of fiberglass or made out of plastic that are much cheaper. Carbon fiber just gives you a little extra edge. Is it worth it? You know, if you're only going once in a while, heck no. If you want to go around the world and do nothing but it, yeah, it's worth it. Anyway, for all of this as well, you're going to need a weight belt. And I don't have it rigged up as well in this photo, but when I dive the Bahamas, it looks closer to Batman's utility belt. First thing to note is the clips I have on it. The clasp that actually holds it to me is a quick release. I can simply slap that and it will drop all the weight off from my body. It's very, very useful if you're about to black out, if you get tangled. It's a safety feature. And I'm proud to say I've had this dive belt since I started spearfishing. So I haven't had to use it yet, but I've been ready to. A dive knife, I would say, is one of the most important things besides your spear gun to carry on you. One of my biggest fears is getting tangled in my line. This spear gun here has a reel line to it as well. When I dive the Bahamas, I use a belt reel. It is basically this attached to here. This has Dyneema on it, and you're not breaking Dyneema anytime soon, but the knife will cut through it easily, so that's why it's there. And obviously the weight belt is there to hold on the weights. That will properly that will keep your buoyancy proper as you're spearfishing, and that's kind of a subject in and of itself. What else do we have here? I'm using as well a float and a float line. It's actually a special line that doesn't kink, but I also have the reel. This gave me the best of both worlds, but it was a slightly complicated setup. This isn't essential, but I highly recommend it. I love diving with a GoPro. I get almost as excited as getting a good fish or experience on camera as I do about actually shooting a good fish. It kind of, and plus if you miss that fish of a lifetime, well, at least you can, show your friends. So that's very important. Gloves. Some people dive without gloves, and I think they're crazy. I just can't do it. I just don't like it. So I wear gloves to whatever region I'm at. If it's colder, they're going to be padded. Otherwise, I'm wearing gloves that have Kevlar interlaced into them. They won't prevent, say, like the poking of a large lobster's horns. I've got scars from that, regardless. But a lot of other things will help with. But particularly, really, it's for holding the fish. They do a great job at that. Dive light is great, not just if you're going to be going into caves, but if you're just looking under ledges. It's really, if you want to find lobster or other things, you kind of need a dive light, because by the time you actually dive down to a ledge, you've been up top where it's super, super bright, and that ledge is a big shadow. By the time you get down under there, your vision will not be acclimated to it. So that flashlight will let you see what's going on. And sometimes you'll kind of stun a fish a little bit, or a lobster will kind of look at the light and just be like, "Ooh, I wonder what that is." It's a good time to take a shot on them. Let's see what else we got here. The spears come in a few different styles as well. This is actually a pretty good photo that shows that. This is called a flopper. Obviously the spear is just one long piece in this case, and they just put a hinge through it, and then this metal flange that comes off with a slight lip to it, and it's only very slight. This is the simplest and probably the tried and truest one. This setup is great if you end up spearing a fish that's in between some rocks. It won't bust apart, versus this would be the system you would never want to shoot near rocks. This is called a slip tip. This right here, well, this portion back here, sits on this nipple, and this line gets pulled back and just tucked away. And then when it's fired, it's just on there just by force, I guess you could say. It punches through the fish, and then it toggles just like you can see it here. So the fish would be right here. This is specifically meant for pelagics. You can use it on other things. My Neritic pole spear I use in the Bahamas has a cable version of this. It has the best holding ratio of anything else. In other words, it will hold the fish and not tear out better than anything else. I also have a flasher here in the photo that helps to attract pelagic fish. And I'll go into what pelagics are a little bit later. Fillet knife, very important. Booties. I can wear these fins without booties, but some of them you need booties for. And then if you do have a spearfishing wetsuit, or a wetsuit designed for free diving and then thereby for spearfishing, you actually need, I think we use conditioner. Yeah, we usually use conditioner to get into them, just because that's how tight they are. On my sailboat, this is my setup, and actually here I can kind of see my gloves getting well worn through the season, a belt reel I attached on, and here's actually 2 pole spears, because I think I had to use the double system for what I was hunting at the time. So the gear can take up some space. This is my world record I shot up in Alaska. I think that was 2017 or so. And here you can see I use the slip tip. Not much of a smiler in that photo. But here you can see I use the slip tip, and that helped a lot. And we'll go into a little bit later actually where my shot goes through. I'll be talking about that in a little bit later. Let's see if there's any other slides. There we go. It looks like I can smile. This is actually the setup off the back of my sailboat, and I'll talk about this more later. But here you can see my spear gun laid across, a flopper, a couple fish. Those are Cero mackerel, I believe. Yeah, here you can see a pole spear they managed to break on a nice size Kubera snapper. In this case, on this pole spear, and this is kind of important to talk to right here, this pole spear I rigged up 2 bands, which is actually why I broke it. It's not due to the fish. But effectively what a pole spear is, for those of you that don't know, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a pole with an elastic loop on it, or at the bottom. You grab your hand right here, holding a bit of the loop, and then you pull your hand. If you can see my mouse, you pull up, 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 and then you grip tight up here. And I actually have grip tape on, there we go, there's a good photo. So you grip it all the way up. I'm using the biggest pole spear they make, the heaviest one they make, I'm pretty sure. You don't have to do that. They make much smaller ones. They're rated for, generally smaller fish. It doesn't cost a tenth as much probably. So that's what all that does. I don't have any photos of a Hawaiian sling. That is the other method that's allowed in the Bahamas. Most of you out there, though, are going to be allowed to use a spear gun. And this spear gun I've taken with me around the world. I shot my world record on it, everything. It's a great brand. I can't say anything bad about it, flat out. Especially with the underside mounted reel, that really helps a lot. This is called a Rife Euro 120, and I'm using the enclosed track model. And effectively, you can see its power source. Two very thick bands. It's an underwater crossbow is all it is. Two thick bands pull all the way back to the notches back here. A trigger here, like any gun, will then shoot the spear straight out the front. And that's it. A spear gun is far, far more accurate, far harder hitting, far longer range than a pole spear or a Hawaiian sling kind of ever can be. You just can't hold that motion and hold it like you can with a spear gun. And the fact that a spear gun's always ready to go, it simply makes it better. And that's why it's illegal in the Bahamas, because the fish are just kind of dumb as it is. It'd be overkill. So yeah, so most of you out there can get it. The spear gun I use is pretty expensive. I would also recommend the brand Rob Allen very, very highly. Actually got to meet the guy, got to see his workshop. But his guns are all around the world. I've had other cruisers get them. And you want to get a gun length dependent on what you're going to be spearfishing. A gun this long, small fish, very close. The gun you see in the photos, see here if I can screen share quickly. Yeah, so there we go. You can see this gun. I'm going to call myself 6 foot, and this gun looks like it goes to about 5 feet, probably, if not a little bit more. They do make them a little longer than that, but usually they just end up making them beefier at that point. But if you're new to spearfishing, I would recommend getting something a little bit smaller than this, maybe a 4.5 foot gun, and that would serve you really, really well. So that's what I'd recommend on the spearfishing gear side. And I'll be happy to answer questions at the end of all this, just for any of you kind of wondering for the Q&A section. So the next session, or the next section here, would be finding a good spearfishing spot. This is a tough one. When you're starting out and you don't know what's going on, finding where to go to get these big fish can be, it can be daunting. It can be really, really daunting. So here I'm going to try to kind of share some of my knowledge that I picked up over the years, and really been very blessed to have a lot of people help me out and show me. So I came up with kind of 5 rules of thumb to find your own spots. This is a shot in Alaska, by the way. I don't get too many shots of myself out of the water, kind of a tough one. But anyway, so 5 general rules, for finding your own good spearfishing spot. The first thing would be figure out what your fish is and go where they hunt and where they feed. So let's take, for example, snapper. Snapper is pretty similar around the world. There's many different species. Some look nothing like the other, but I guarantee you everybody here has heard of snapper or probably eaten it before. It's a good white fish, it's a reef fish, great. So snapper like to usually eat smaller bait fish. So smaller bait fish like to hide on the up current. There we go. If there's a ledge, a rock, a reef, something like that, the bait fish might be scattered here. The current might be coming up like this. Bait fish are just going to hide right there, and the snapper are going to want to come in and feed on them there. So that's kind of a first good way. Think about your species, think about where they eat, and go there. 2, find the structure or home that your species is looking for. If you're trying to target mahi-mahi, they are a signature pelagic fish, meaning that they're out in the open blue water. So finding them is difficult. You have to rely on their curiosity a bit more. Or often you can find them over what's known as a FAD, fish aggregation device. That could be a log, a piece of driftwood out in the water. If you see that while you're sailing, jump in, see what's underneath it. You'd be really surprised. Jellyfish, many smaller non-edible pelagic fish under there as well. Wahoos, tunas, all sorts of things could be under there. Versus the structure or home, again, of the snapper is going to be the reef. They want to snuggle in at night underneath a little cave, a ledge, something like that, to get away from their predators. Rule number 3 would be get away from the other fishermen. I regularly go kiteboarding here in Fort Pierce, Florida, and there's a jetty that always has 100 fishermen on it, and I don't think I've ever seen one of them catch something. I'm not saying they haven't or they couldn't, but go where there isn't other fishermen, because if there's 10 people on a spot, there probably is 10 people there the next day and 10 people there the previous year. It's going to be fished out. You're just not going to find a lot. It's good maybe to sort of get an idea of what your environment should look like that you're aiming for, but other than that, I wouldn't recommend it. Rule number 4 is dive at different times for the same spot. The current plays a huge role in whether a spot is going off or not, whether certain areas, I like reef diving. Reef diving is great. That's what most of you are going to be doing for a long time. And there's nothing wrong with it. You get great fish that way. You learn a lot. You see much more, and it's the least boring. It's the most exciting. When a spot is going off and the current hits it right, when there's nutrients coming in, the bait fish are active, thereby the predator fish are active, thereby the alpha predator. In California, I know it would be like the lingcod, for instance. No fish is tougher than that guy on the reef. So they're all going to be out. As well, diving in the morning is going to be some of your best times. The afternoon's not too bad, but they're just not going to be nearly as active. You're going to have to hunt for them under rocks versus in the early morning, first sign of the sun. They're going to be a little sleepy. They're going to be getting up. They're going to be hungry. They're going to be active. That's going to be your best shot to go out and get them. Rule number 5. I think I actually have a slide for this one because a picture is worth 1,000 words. Oh yeah. Always check the stomach of what you kill. These were 2 different of my biggest Cubera snapper that I've ever spearfished. This one, as you can see, I don't know if you can recognize what it is, but that is a large lobster. It is almost digested. If I hadn't spearfished this Cubera deep inside of a cave that had lobster in it, it would have told me to go there, but I sort of already knew that. This one had a stingray in its stomach. These are not normal examples, by the way, folks. These are very unusual. Normally, you're going to find maybe squid, maybe bait fish, maybe urchin or shellfish, crab of some sort. All those will give you clues to where your target species like to go. So anyway, it's just kind of cool what you actually can end up finding in them. This is actually taken in the Marquesas Keys in the Florida Keys there, off of Florida. And yeah, I mean, you got several different zones here. Just to kind of give you an example. If I wanted to get mangrove snapper, I would go right in these sides right here. I know these are pretty deep and the current runs through here. I know the mangrove roots go deep into they go shallow into the water. But that provides a lot of sanctuary for these mangrove snapper, which get to decent edible size. I pretty much was living off them for a month when I was in the Mud Keys in what was it? That was last year during COVID times. If I wanted probably like a bigger fish, maybe like a grouper or something, this is a little too shallow for that. I might do a drift dive, but then I'm going to want to head to open water, and it's misleading. This is all turtle grass underneath me, but you would be looking for signs like this. If you live in a place where you can't see the bottom, well, that just means you have to get in the water a little bit more. And that's going to be the first real part of this lesson. Is the person who gets the best fish is usually, especially consistently, is somebody who's in the water the most. When I go diving, I usually spend about 8 hours in the water diving the whole day. Bring water, bring snacks, whatever, but that's what I go for. But anyway, here are a few other ways you guys can help, kind of find your own dive spots. Google Maps is outstanding. I use it still to this day, especially for, again, right now my mind is focused on the Bahamas. If I was going somewhere else, I'd be giving all the intel on that. But looking at Google Maps is good for clear water, but it actually is also still pretty good for murky water. Let's take, for example, the northern coast of California. It's pretty rough up there. Even the central coast gets pretty rough, say like Santa Cruz area, where I dove quite a bit. If I look on Google Maps, I find a really rocky shoreline, and maybe I find some sandy shoreline as well. That sandy shoreline is going to extend out with sand, most likely. That rocky shoreline is going to extend out with rock and turn into really good reef, most likely. So go and dive those spots. Next up would be Navionics. If you're a sailor, you should be pretty familiar with the system. That's pretty much a slam dunk. It has little fish markers on it. If you go to a place that's further away from a port, further away from people can get, it has a little fish marker on it, you should do pretty good. And if you go at the right time, you should do pretty good for yourself. Next one would be local intel. Talk to the locals. See what they think. See what they say. Be nice, be respectful. It is their area. They don't own it, but they deserve the respect of that. But they can help you out quite a bit. Telltale signs are another really good one. If you're sailing along and you see a massive, we call it a boil of bait fish getting stirred up, and usually you'll see it first from the birds, seabirds diving on them, go dive that. That is some of the most fun you could ever have. It can be very dangerous, so word of caution there. But that means bait fish are being pushed up to the surface. The birds are seeing that and they're capitalizing on it. So they're just really the capitalistics of the situation. Usually it's a tuna underneath, could be mahi, could be wahoo. Probably a lot of times too, it's also dolphin. The big one you don't want to spear, the nice one we all like. So telltale signs are really good. Sometimes the fish do jump out of the water, and it's worth it to go check it out. Dive everywhere. And then the last one, which is probably the single best way to find a good dive spot, friends with dive spots that tell you exactly where to go. That's just really, really, really hard to beat. And it kind of wraps up that section. Moving on here, getting to your dive site. So I would say there's sort of 4 different ways to get to a dive site. And this is all, again, I know you guys came here to hear about how you pull a trigger on a fish, but much like sailing around the world isn't just about sailing. It's about meteorology. It's about anchoring. It's about engines. It's about electrical. Spearfishing is much the same way. You have to have all these facets come together to be a successful spear hole. So getting to your dive site. First one I would say would be a shore dive. This means you're just walking out with your gear. This is in Big Sur, California, kind of like my stomping ground. Absolutely love it out there. I've never gone hungry. Very plentiful, but you're never going to spear a 40-pound fish or anything bigger than that there, but great spot. You can see here, I've got my spear gun in hand. I have a dive bag. I can see my flashlight, my float, my fin sticking up. I have no reel on this, so I'm probably just going to use the float instead, and that's fine because these fish aren't that big. But I'm going to climb down. I'm just going to get down in there, and that's good enough. The pros of a shore dive is it's cheap, it's simple, little prep, little gear. The cons to it is you're limited by your range, really as far as you can swim out and back, dragging what you have. I haven't ever really come back with too big of a fish. Probably would have been in the Central California area. It probably would have been a stringer combined of maybe 40 pounds of fish. Knowing your area is very important. Knowing what kind of sharks are there and whatnot. NorCal and SoCal, actually pretty much all of California is pretty safe as far as sharks go. We don't have sharks that harass divers too badly, except for an occasional great white. I've only ever encountered one in California, so it's not that bad. Your odds are pretty small. But I'll be talking about sharks in a little bit. The next way would be kayaking or paddleboarding. This is me in Alaska. I look pretty unhappy because I've been kayaking all day and I need to get a sailboat. But kayaking and paddleboarding is a great way to get out to your dive site. You get good distance. It doesn't cost too much. It's reliable as long as you can keep paddling. You can bring your gear. You can get out of the water. It's got a lot of pros to it and no significant cons. So if you don't have a boat, this is a great way to go about it and you want to get a little more serious. The next way would be a motorboat. Here I am, Australia, I don't know, New Zealand, but these are all different motorboats, center consoles of varying sizes with the guys. This accounts for most of the spearfishers out there. They leave from, they trailer their boat from their house. They go out for a quick mission. They motor out fast on good conditions, and then they come back before conditions get bad. This is probably the most common. The pros to this, you got the speed, you're highly nimble, you don't have a deep draft. You can hold pretty much any fish that you spear. I don't have any photos of the eskies, but you can see this guy here. With 3 guys, especially in Australia, I filled coolers like this. It's very, very doable. Versus if you're doing a shore dive, you simply can't do it. If you're doing a kayak dive, you're only limited really to a couple fish, and then you got to bring it back just for the ice sake. And I would say, yes, if you're, most of you are probably gonna be doing this out of your dinghy, like I'll be doing this season. You're gonna be doing this out of your dinghy, like I will be this season. You don't need a cooler for the first several hours or first couple hours even if you're in hot sun. If it's a cloudy day and you're in cold conditions, you're even better. But what's highly, highly key to preserve your fish is just a wet towel that you don't care about with seawater. Just keep it wet, keep it cool. Every time you kind of come back in, come back out, maybe take your fin pocket and just scoop a little seawater on it. That does wonders. That really does. You don't need a cooler, but of course it is nice. And then the last way, the fourth one, is a sailboat. Now, this is unique because we have unlimited range. We can go sail around the world. We can go to Pitcairn if we want to go diving. And that's the whole reason why I got a sailboat. This was my sailboat as of last year, so I've done some major modifications since then, which I'll be happy to share with the group at a later time. But on this boat, and I hope I have a photo ready to go, I do not, unfortunately. But on this boat, I've made specific modifications so I can actually spearfish directly off of it, which sailboats, especially older ones, mine's 1984, weren't really meant to do, direct spearfish, direct expeditions into the water. So a little bit of modification might be needed, but most of you are going to be using your dinghy. There's a high field dinghy, rigid hull inflatable. Most of you probably have one of these. They're great. You get a little bit of the benefit of the motorboat with that. You're able to not worry about your draft too much. You can load an esky or a cooler into there as well, or you can just do the sloppy fish method, which is probably what I'm going to be doing for this whole time. So those are a bit of your ways that you can be doing, to be getting out to your dive sites. So a little bit on that. Hope I'm moving along. Joy, if you can give me a nod if we're doing good on time here, or a shake of your head if I need to hurry up. Oh no, she looks angry. Can you guys see her? She looks so angry. I'm kidding. Oh man, I wish you guys could see all that. Anyway, so moving on, this is a section you guys probably all actually tuned into. This is spearfishing and ocean foraging. Now, most of you probably never heard the term ocean foraging. I don't think I made it up, but it's close to it. It's not something that you hear super often, but it's very, very important. So first up is spearfishing. Spearfishing is the actual act of pulling the trigger on a fish. It's that big moment. This is my spear gun that I took around the world I was talking about with the GoPro mounted onto the gun. And these were all taken the absolute moment before I pull the trigger. This one in particular, you can actually see the vibrations of the bands as it's about to plow into. This would have been my biggest fish ever. The footage on it's hilarious because I use a reel to shoot this fish and I get dragged. And I actually kept my gear on this somehow. And the fish wasn't too harmed, so it wasn't too bad. But anyway, all of these are more or less pelagic fish. This is kind of a good example. We got a king mackerel here. We have a wahoo in South Africa here. Another king mackerel. King mackerel in Australia here. A snook or a Natal snook, which is actually a member of the mackerel family in South Africa. And this one, as well as this big guy, are Samson fish off of Western Australia. And then this is golden trevally off of Australia. I'm actually lining up on a double shot. Make sure you know what fish you're going to try to double shoot if you do line up in that situation because, yeah, they took me for a ride as well. But anyway, so spearfishing, this is the actual moment when you're pulling the trigger. You can see on pretty much all of these, this one I'm lined up a little bit further away, but this one's really good. This one, I'm so close, I know I can punch through the gill plate. This is one of the only times I'll take a shot like that, especially on a fish of this size. This fish would have been well over 80 pounds. It's tough to see in the photo though. But generally speaking, the shot you want is where this spear tip is lined up, maybe a little bit higher. And this is my preferred area to spear. This is really for this is a good mid-sized fish. This is probably like a 13 to 15 pound fish. It's going to have a decent fight on it. It's important to know certain species fight harder than others. But I like to aim right here, just above the dorsal fin, just behind the gill plate. You'll often hook into its, the flopper, I should say, will engage into the fish's collarbone. And the odds of you tearing off are almost nil. If it's a smaller fish, then yes, or if I think I can clear a stone shot, as it's called, I'll aim for the sweet head spot, or the stone shot is a kind of an insta kill. It's right where the brain is. And sometimes you get lucky with the spine. Sometimes you hit them in the spine and they just kind of go limp right at that. But you're going to aim right there for the brain. I don't do that very often. I prefer to know that I'm going to get a holding shot. I know I'm going to retrieve my fish, especially if it's a bigger fish. Like these are all in the 50 pound, maybe just short of 50 pounds. And then they'll have the capacity to drown me. So I don't want to take a shot like that and miss. So yeah, and then let's say for bigger fish, for the really large and the huge ones, and you won't be shooting these for probably a couple of years, but when you do get to, I would say easily, this one I probably should have done this shot on, marlin-sized fish, which again, know your rules and regulation. It's very, very few places you can shoot a marlin, but it is still possible. But anyway, if it's a big enough fish, you actually want to aim back here in the tail. There's a lot of tendons here that will help hold your shot in place so the fish can't tear out, but you actually take away the motor of the fish. You greatly reduce its ability to really floor it, to really pull you along. So to recap, small enough fish, go for the brain so you don't ruin meat. When they get to that medium size where they're about, from 10 to 50 pounds is what I call a medium-sized fish. Again, it varies on who you talk to, but I enjoy this spot right here. if I'm a little high, if I'm a little low, if I'm a little left, if I'm a little right, I'm going to connect with something really good. It's kind of like center mass, with the exception of this is a wahoo. I'm lining up in the very center of a wahoo because it's a particular fish. They have very soft flesh. So anyway, so it's kind of where you aim on some of those. Once you do spear the fish, here we can see I got my mark pretty much right where I wanted it. A lot of good meat to hold on to there, and now the fight ensues. Now, these are all, pretty much every fish here that you're seeing in the footage is about a 50-pound fish. These are all pelagics as well. Again, pelagics are out in the blue water. They're out in super deep water usually, and they're fish with that sporty tail. This is Western Australia. This is a yellowtail kingfish, one of my favorite, if not my favorite fish out there. And you can see, again, got that shot right where I wanted it. Basically, when you spear a fish, you have to be ready for the fight. If you're spearing something under 10 pounds, the fight's just not going to be that bad. Let's just be honest. You know, it'll tug you a little bit, be like, yeah, you know, come here. Where your shot is what matters on how much you're going to pull the fish in or play it, you know, softly. So if your shot isn't good, you're going to be nice and soft on it. And you're going to let it run a little line, pull a little line back, kind of a thing, until you can get a hand on the ankle or up in the gills. The gills is the best spot, especially that's why you want to have gloves on. You will get caught on a lot of fish. It's not bad, but it's very abrasive in their gills usually. But you're going to want to, let's see if I can get a photo going here of them. Yep, so here my hand is in the gills from underneath, and here as well, my hand is in the gills from underneath. That is the best place to secure the fish. Here on this wahoo, I have my hand on his tail. Again, the tail here on this Natal snook. And then in this case, the spear just went through so well. This is a tusk fish, member of the wrasse family in Australia. The spear is through just so well enough that I know I can just kind of hang on to it there. And actually, here's a good example. This was actually a stone shot going through a grouper, which I believe they call it a groper in Australia. So anyway, so that's how you're going to get a hold of the fish. And the next thing you're going to do is you're going to want to put it in the cooler or something like that. But before you put it in the cooler, actually, you're going to want to bleed it. You can see in this one here, we have a bunch of tuna. These are, I think these were hook and line caught. Yeah, they have no spear holes. They were hook and lined. But before we drop them in the cooler, we would always cut the gills. When I'm in the water, though, I cut the gills, or I rip the gills out. And this is a bit of a brutal method, but I personally recommend it. Be careful if there's sharks around. You don't want to have there be too much blood right there if a shark is in your face. I'll touch on that a little bit real quick. So, for instance, when I'm in the Bahamas has the most aggressive sharks I've ever come across. It's the Caribbean reef sharks. They're not terribly big. They're rarely ever over 150 pounds, but they're highly aggressive, and they're trained by a lot of scared spearfishermen out there. Most people are afraid of the sharks out there, and most people, as soon as they see a shark, they give their fish away. So the sharks have kind of learned that. So this is a special one we're dealing with. Normally when I'm spearfishing, I hit a fish. The fish is going to start making vibrations by its struggle through the water. That is what sharks pick up on. This isn't Jaws, ladies and gentlemen. A drop of blood doesn't hit the water, and from a mile away, crocky, here comes Jaws. Doesn't work like that. Does not work like that. The vibrations, however, it does work like that. Maybe not a mile, but it's fast. It's very, very fast. So you spear the fish, maybe a shark comes around. You want to judge its body language a little bit. You want to see how aggressive it looks like it's being, because usually they're kind of afraid of you. Most sharks are. I've gone toe-to-toe with sharks far bigger than me, punched them, stabbed them, whatnot. You don't have to do that, but, you know, I like to kind of let them know a little bit more. That I'm an equal predator in the water. And remember that you're in the food chain out there. It's not like on land where you're number one. In the water, you definitely aren't number one anymore. But anyway, if you are gutting and gilling the fish in the water, which for the preservation of the quality of the meat, that's why I recommend it. If you're doing that, and a shark is right there, if they get too much blood, or if they get to taste a little fish, that's when they pick up the extra aggression. And that's pretty much for any shark species. I've never lost a fish to a shark, so I don't have any footage, but effectively what it looks like you can try, but you're really not going to do it. And again, I'll go over sharks a little bit more later and what you can do about that. Moving on with the there we go. Moving on, so you bleed the fish, and then you throw it into the cooler. Gilling it and gutting it is really recommended. That'll really preserve the quality of the fish. you're probably not gonna do anything with the guts anyways, and the guts, in my opinion, make really good burley or chum. And for instance, that photo I showed earlier where I had 4 small fish from Marathon, I got all those fish because I speared one. I speared one fish, I gilled it, I gutted it, I dropped that. Another fish would come in to check it out, I would spear that fish, and I was able to keep that cycle going. It's really, really cool when you can. Here's a good example actually of a stone shot. This is a queen triggerfish. A lot of people actually reacted to this photo when I published it online a couple years ago. Queen triggerfish are a delicious, sustainable fish. They're not endangered in any way, and they are not a known carrier of ciguatera in quantities to give you sickness, but I don't see why they couldn't. But anyway, moving on. I got a good stone shot on this one. The fish never knew what hit him. If I could, I will do this every single time. That is a great way to do it. When there are sharks around in the Bahamas, this is what I do. Again, everybody deal with sharks in your own way. I'm not going to tell you how to handle them, but I call this a flagpole method, and it's actually really effective. The sharks, if they can't see the fish or it's not in the water, they won't come near me. I usually have my dive knife in my hand, but they usually won't come within 10 feet of me, which is about my range. They seem to kind of know that. Yeah, here's a good example. And again, here's a good example of a shot placement not gone right. Cubera snappers are probably the hardest fish I've ever, outside of king salmon, probably the hardest fish. This one was actually able to tear the spear back through it. This was my first shot. This was the second shot. So if you do tear out, go back down, try to give it another dive. I don't know if I have any shots here of the open gill. This is a schoolmaster snapper from the Bahamas. Do not spear them and eat them. I can't recommend them. I believe I got ciguatera from this species. Here we go. Yeah, so this is the shot placement gone a little bit wrong. This is a slip tip method. So the other tip is toggled right over there. You can kind of almost see it, I think. And you can see how it's just a line going through the body of the fish. Here's another really good shot placement. This is a rock hind in the Bahamas, and they're a little more known for carrying ciguatera. I probably won't spear these again. There's plenty of other species anyway. But this one fought quite a bit and actually tore back away. So you can see my shot placement was pretty much right on cue where I wanted it to be. And the pole spear, I'm not nearly as accurate with the pole spear as I am with my gun. Another Cubera. And here we go. So this is a cool little slide show I've set up. This is my camera is mounted, my GoPro is mounted onto my mast. If you guys can see, there is a yellow-finned grouper, probably my new favorite to eat fish in the Bahamas. They're pretty close or right there up with Cubera as far as tastiness goes. So I've spotted this fish over the reef. It was attracted actually because, a couple other fish were swimming around there. There was some commotion under the water. And this fish was actually attracted to the vibrations as well. So we have a predatory fish who thinks there's something going on. He goes out to check it. I see him. I know he's seen me, so I'm going to start doing my dive. You can see right here, I am loaded up on my pole spear, ready to take the shot. And that's just kind of how you have to be for pole spear. With a spear gun, you can just keep it outstretched, out far ahead of you. Actually, do you want to show that in the camera? I actually hold mine usually like this. Some people do it like from here. But you want to put your gun as close to the fish as you can as you're diving down. It's very important to do that. Back to the slides. So I dive down. The fish is going for this cave right here, obviously. And I'm kind of trying to time my shot. I'm not kicking too quick. I don't want to spook the fish. I'm actually gliding down. The weights on my weight belt, I think I probably have like 1 or 2 pounds of lead on me. That's just allowing me to kind of just sink slowly. It's kind of like free falling, like skydiving. It feels great. So this fish is trying to make it to this cave. I already know this. I am timing to launch my spear right here, the moment before he gets it. It's not ideal. I spear him out in the open because here's a shot. The shot is pretty tough to get in, but I'm going to get it just above the dorsal fin. And then bam, the fish is going to hole up. Grouper are notoriously difficult to get out of a hole. I use a belt reel, which I'm not going to show, I guess, in the slides, but I have a belt reel attached. So I'm going to take that shot, and I'm immediately going to go to the surface to start my next breathe up. I'm probably about 30 feet down at this point. Not too terribly deep, but that's probably going to max most of you out once you become competent at free diving. And then that's gone in. He has actually gone around like a pillar, and he is completely, my internet connection is unstable. Joy, can you nod your head if you can see me well? All right, I'm gonna keep going. Joy, just wave your hands if I'm not coming through clear. Next time if I'm not coming through clear. Anyway, so here I can see my shot a little bit. I can see he's come around. I'm able to push him backwards and get him up out of the hole. He actually re-holed, I think, a whole other time on top of that. But anyway, but now I'm able to get the fish up. This was a really sharky area, so I immediately handed up to the boatie. The boatie puts in the cooler. There's now no longer fish in the water, and now I get to go home with the fish. And this is actually a great segue into the ocean harvesting and ocean foraging. So here's a really good example of it. I have a yellowfin grouper. Pretty tough to actually tell. It took my friend Addison Chan to tell me which species it was. I thought it was a black, but yeah, they're a tough one. I've got a nice mature conch. I have a batwing coral crab. Pretty seldom to see these guys. They hide very deep in the reef, and they're very well camouflaged. I've got a hogfish and I've got a lobster. This to me is a great day. I am super stoked on this as opposed to one big fish, because I get to make, with this one fish here, I'm probably gonna take the fillets off, and the fillets will be done a number of ways. The collars, which is kind of like this meaty section here that controls the pectoral fins. It's very, very meaty, very good. Think of like a chicken wing, delicious like that. If you have a smoker, then cut the whole fish frame off and smoke with whatever you can't fillet, you can smoke that off. That's just delicious. And then the head for fish head soup. And that's a great meal. I really, really want to stress this to everybody. That's what you should be going for in all of this, is using every part of the fish that you possibly can. So moving on, hope I'm not taking too long. Oh man, I'm taking a while. Anyway, back to it though. Conch is great a million different ways. I could do a whole seminar on conch. Some people get angry when they see somebody taking one conch, but I have walked on mounds of it. Me taking one conch every 2 months, not doing anything. Batwing coral crab was absolutely delicious. Like stone crab, just a little more tropical. It was amazing. Hogfish, similar. It's another white fish. It's another reef fish. It's kind of similar to this. And just by the way, this is the opposite of a pelagic. This is a reef fish. Big broomy tail, big thick body, big mouth. Maybe some teeth. That's a reef fish. And then last but definitely not least is lobster. In the Bahamas, you're allowed to spear them. I usually go catch them by hand. I probably did spear this one though if they're small enough and into a hole. Most places around the world you have to catch them by hand, which I think is a little more fun, a little more sporting. But I've also been bitten by a moray eel for sticking my hand in holes, so I don't recommend it. Moving on to that, this is Alaska. This is a giant Pacific octopus. I think the third largest octopus species out there. I'm guessing on that one. He's red because he's angry, and it is a he, not a she. I checked the den to make sure there were no eggs before I started working on this one. Again, I could do a seminar on just getting octopus. This one was pretty difficult, but the pot shot of it is, don't grab one this big if you're not used to it. They can and will drown you. People have died this way. But you really just got to grab the mantle, which is back here, and just rip. And it's brutal. It's an absolutely brutal affair. But octopus is one of the fastest growing proteins in the world, so pretty unique. Let's bring some fish. Here we go. This is some abalone. Here's the shell from the top, and then here's the bottom. I think you can't get abalone on the West Coast right now unless you live in Alaska. I think they just made that illegal in California and maybe so in Oregon. I'm not sure, but either way, abalone is kind of another cool one. This is off of Cairns, Australia, underneath the little coral head. This is the most SOL lobster you have ever seen. He has nowhere to go. I should take a step back. These are spiny rock lobster. They're the most common lobster around the world. The lobster, when you use the lobster emoji, when you think of red lobster, that is a North Atlantic lobster. There's a few other varieties of it, but they're the ones that have the pinchers. Most lobsters do not. These are going to be in your more temperate waters, your more tropical waters. But yeah, they can pretty much just swim back really fast. They're incredibly spiky. They can't outswim you if you're out in the open. Actually, they run out of steam really quick. So in this case, that's actually how I get them. I don't think I even grab them. Again, conch, absolutely beautiful, delicious. I've talked with the Fish and Game experts, if you will, the Fish and Game officers. There we go. And what you're looking for is a thick-lipped conch. That will tell you that it is a mature one. And this is about the thickest. And again, and also you want to see a big flange coming up here. But this is pretty much as good as it gets as far as conch goes. It's a big one, had plenty of meat, was very mature, was very old. So that's on conch. This is, I don't know the exact name, but obviously it's a type of squid. Big rule of thumb with squid is clean them in the water. This ink will just fade right off of you in the water. On the boat, it will stain everything. Squid is delicious. Can't rate it highly enough. Batwing coral crab, kind of went over that, delicious. That was my biggest pack horse rock lobster in New Zealand, absolutely delicious. Here we've got a scallop, actually, a rock scallop in Northern California, and you can see some big barnacles are growing on it. These are all abalone, actually, and you can clearly see that they can grow a giant barnacle or a volcano. I don't even know what these were, but all sorts of strange marine life. So that's pretty cool. You guys are probably wondering what this is. This is the roe out of a salmon that I just got. So there's a lot of things in the ocean you can eat raw, and I could do a whole seminar on that, but that'd be for another time. Channel clinging crab in the Bahamas, delicious. Sheephead crab, I believe, anyway, type of spider crab in Southern California, delicious. You need a hammer to get through it. And then I'll probably leave off with this to move on to the next section. They call this kinna in New Zealand, but it's sea urchin. This is probably my favorite type of sea urchin, and I've eaten in a few different places around the world. It's absolutely delicious, but you got to just kind of know when's the season and what you got to go for. And certain types of sea urchin just don't have any roe, but this stuff is, I mean, I would kill to have this right now. I would absolutely kill for it. Here's a lobster swimming, as I've just missed it because I'm not used to spearing them. And that's how they swim, is backwards. Here is the batwing coral crab, and how I found him was he was trying to go after this. It's either a Triton's trumpet or a tulip type of snail. So again, kind of looking around, look under ledges. You'd be surprised what you can find. Make sure you handle them properly. And this is kind of going outside of that, but the beautiful thing about spearfishing is you get to have these awesome, incredible ocean encounters. These are humpback whales that came over to say hi to me. I don't think I have the exact still. No, I don't. But I got to look at these things eye to eye, and yeah, it was pretty incredible. I could do a whole seminar on looking at a humpback whale's eye and it looking at me. It was unreal. Similarly, this is about a 9-foot great hammerhead. This was this past summer in the Bahamas. I actually got to ride this guy, which was pretty cool. Got really good footage of it. Big mouth, lots of gnarly teeth. Great hammerheads are not man-eaters. I am so tired of people messaging me and telling me that I could have been eaten alive. I'm like, yeah, I could have. Yeah, he could have if he wanted to, maybe. But they're not man-eaters. They don't have the statistics. I'm just going to go right into that. The sharks. Many of you probably want to know about sharks. It's probably your biggest thing. It's one of the first questions I always get asked. Sharks. And here's the real killer. Not killer, maybe, but the real aggressor. Caribbean reef shark. Here's me with my catch, just looking at him close to me. I know if I move and thrash in the water, he'll run. He's a scaredy cat. But great hammerheads. I don't think there's any documentation saying that they've actually killed someone. Maybe there's different categories of shark attacks, and that's a whole other topic. But long story short, on average, between 6 to 10 people in the world die from shark attacks. 6 to 10 in 365 days. It's not a lot. 150 people die each year from coconuts falling on them. Please stop being so afraid of the sharks. They're really not that bad. Show confidence in the water. Make yourself look a little bit bigger. Group up with a few other people. But sharks just aren't that bad. They're really not. So anyway, moving on with that. Sharks. This is a nurse shark. They're like puppy dogs. Just be careful when you're feeding them. This is a tiger shark. They're one of the big three. Bull shark, tiger shark, and great white shark. Great whites hold the record for most kills because they only do one attack, but it's usually fatal because they can just rip so much when they do it. It's the great white you don't see that you should be afraid of, and that's really more so if you're in South Africa or like California, maybe Guadeloupe or something like that. But your odds of getting whacked by a great white are just so slim. It's going to be somebody in South Africa most likely. Bull sharks have the most attacks. They're just a very aggressive species. I've been charged a lot by them when I was in Australia, and I would just charge back at them. I would just swim at them, maybe blow some bubbles, but I'd play chicken with them and I'd win. So that's good. But I did have a friend who actually got his hand bit, but it was because they're going after the fish. So moving on from there. Yeah, here's a nurse shark alongside a Caribbean reef. These guys are the ones I worry about, not really anybody else. This bull shark came in to see me at 70 feet down in South Africa. I think they call them Zambesis there. I was worried I could have had an attack at that depth, but it was okay. This is a sand tiger shark. I think they also call them nurse sharks there in South Africa. Big set of gnarly teeth on them. I got so close to these things. They are pretty docile. At least this region's ones were. Basically what I'm getting at is just know your shark species. You know, if you know them, you can be good. Here is probably like a 300-pound nurse shark that tried to take my fish. So I gave it a little love tap on the top of the skull, which didn't really phase it at all. It just came right back. But these guys aren't really too bad to deal with. This was actually in the Keys of all places. This is a barracuda that I have just speared and I am learning a lesson from. Really interesting footage, and I now still have these marks on my gun, but it did try to attack me. But I was able to get a hold of it, so not too bad. I've been bitten by a moray eel. It sucks, to put it bluntly. This is my GoPro on a pole. You do want to watch out for these guys. This is a olive brown sea snake. Really easy way to tell if a sea snake is venomous or not. They're all venomous. Easy. This guy was super curious. Kind of what I'm getting at, you guys, is that most things out in the ocean just should be enjoyed. Don't even worry about it, you know, just enjoy kind of what's out there. And actually I had an open wound when I was swimming with this guy. I had a pretty open wound, and it made no difference. So yeah, I can fully say without a doubt, and I've seen plenty of documentation, that blood in the water doesn't mean they're just going to come, you know, chasing after you. I'm going to try to move on because I am definitely running a little bit behind schedule like I do normally. Next here would be some of the different methods of spearfishing. I'm going to kind of just run through this here. So there's reef hunting, which is you're just diving over a reef, you're looking in ledges. That's what most of you guys are going to be doing. You can change that up a little bit. Maybe if you're going up into some mangroves or something like that, that's kind of still reef fishing. You're going after reef species. My personal favorite is to be spearfishing a deeper reef with a head of current on it, because at the surface I'm looking for pelagics, and then I make my dives and I look for reef species, or I might grab a conch or a lobster or something like that, and that's how you get that full day of everything. Blue water hunting is, I kind of discussed it earlier with the wahoo and the tunas and stuff, out in the deep blue. Drift diving is very cool when there is a reef usually it's a reef that has too much current going over it where you can't kick and stay in place. You have your boatie drop you off and you ride the current and you spearfish something along the way. Dragging and towing is kind of new to me in the Bahamas, but now my sailboat is set up just for that, where you drag behind the boat on maybe a rope or something, staying well clear of the propeller. It lets you cover more area, more space. Ambushing is kind of a rare one. I would say that's where you have one spot that you know the fish are going to be coming up to, that you can dive under and maybe kind of hide behind something and wait for them. Not usually very effective. It's usually more of a situational thing. Cave diving, I don't recommend to any of you until you get proficient. I've done quite a bit of it, and it's the easiest way to die by far. It's far more dangerous than any shark I've dove with. There's a million things that can go wrong, but caves tend to have a huge congregation of fish and lobster in them. So make your own decision on that. Night diving is a really, really cool one. You have a flashlight, that's the essential part of it, and nothing else in the ocean. Like you can instantly blind anything, and nothing can blind you. It gives you a significant advantage. But the reason people do it, and they only do it in shallow, 12 feet at the max, but really even shallower than that, is usually going for lobster, something that's nocturnal. And the last one I put on there would be wreck diving, or an artificial structure. These spots are a little bit unique in that you need to spear your fish and get it off the reef ASAP, or you're going to hole up. These spots are also usually well known. They'll have big, if you're in Florida, for instance, they'll have big grouper on them, so do be aware of it. Yeah, so we're going to move along here. Yep. So here's me off of a reef, just kind of back it up again. Here is the setup, and again, I'd love to talk more about this to any other sailor who's interested. I made a little swim platform on the back of my sailboat, and my gun is right here, usually ready to go. And I've got my crew member up at the helm, and I kind of direct them. I'm well behind the prop. There is no physical way possible for me to hit that prop without me seriously trying. But I'm able to put my head down and look at the water and cover so much more ground than I ever could otherwise. We're not actually spearfishing, but this is what dragging can look like. Notice the big smiles. This is inside of a cave on a Cubera snapper. Again, very dangerous. I do not recommend this. And this is one of my biggest Cuberas I'd later spear, again, inside of a cave, very dangerous. So just to give you a little bit of an idea on those ones. So moving on to one of the last sections here is ocean to table, my favorite section. So this is actually how you get your catch in. Here you can see I've spearfished a nice little snapper. I filleted it, So here are my fillets, which I would normally skin these and then cut out the rib meat. On bigger fish, you can use the rib meat, or even smaller ones for a stew or something, but they do have those rib bones. I just usually cut through them. And filleting could be its own subject, by the way, so that'll be a whole other story. But in this case, I actually put this straight onto my grill, just scales and all. I just put it down, and the meat will kind of pop off the skin. It's really great. Here you can see these are the collars on the fish. And this was not a big snapper at all. I mean, this was maybe a 5-pound fish, if that. And I mean, there was good meat on it, you know. Let's see, back up here. There we go. Some butter, you know, some chives, some garlic. That's it. That's all you need, really. I really like the quote, "There's no such thing as a bad fish, only bad chefs." There are very few trash fish out there. I have yet to eat them. And here we are on the boat. You know, I mean, this is as fresh as it gets. And this is what it's all about for me. A lot of guys, and I used to do it too, you know, do big trips and you go spear a lot of fish and then you freeze it all. But to be able to cook it right here and then bam, you know, just eat it right after, it's unreal. Here's a good example. I like to take lobsters. I will cut the tail off, split the tail, do what's called a lobster monet, which is kind of cooking it in butter, basically, kind of like a pan fry with different seasonings. And then I'll steam or usually boil the head with all the legs, everything like that, in salt water. Very important to do it with salt water. And then maybe some sushi that I got from the earlier dive. I mean, the dinners you can make, you know, the smiles you'll put on people's faces. I mean, this was at a hostel. This was at a hostel. You know, I mean, the amount of people that you can feed is, for me, what spearfishing is largely about. It's just a big collage of just get everything you can. You know, I mean, from stews to smoking the fish and then putting it on a salad. Probably one of my favorites is sashimi. This over here is actually sashimi, or I'm sorry, this is sushi and poke. Poke is great to make with your discards. I mean, there's kind of a little bit of everything. I think I got, yeah. Here's some of my other favorite ones. You know, just doing big dinners. Let's go over that later. Yeah, I mean, all stuff's great. Having other sailors on your boat to, you know, feed them some sushi as well is always fun. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to beat. It really is. Here's a really good example. Poke, sushi, sashimi, lobster monet, the tail, and then the carapace. This is like just the most complete ocean seafood meal I can think of. I absolutely love it, especially with the rice and the nori and everything like that. It really makes you feel like you're getting a real full meal. Yeah, here we go. This was Alaska. I did this for some people that hosted me. Just a big sushi and just, I mean, everything. Oh, this is uni, by the way. This is the gonads, effectively, of an urchin. This is what they look like, and it's absolutely delicious once you acquire the taste, and it is an acquired taste. Let me tell you. 2 different types of poke, about 1 million different types of sushi, and then this over here is just sashimi, which is some rice ready to go. And then over here, these are nigiri hand rolls. This was actually the crowd favorite up in Alaska. And all this is a pad of rice, of sushi rice, a bit of sushi. This is my world record, or salmon. This is my salmon world record that I cooked up for everybody or did raw. And then a thing of basil was really, really good. So you can get very creative with it. I think that pretty much does it on that section. So again, I could talk all day about that whole thing, but we'll kind of start wrapping it up. And I guess last, I just kind of want to touch on the lifestyle of spearfishing. For everybody, spearfishing is something different, but for sure for me, it's become this whole lifestyle, this whole thing that I don't just go out and do it recreationally. I do it, you know, I try to live and breathe it. And now that I'm sailing, I can do it as a way to sustain myself, often other sailors as well. So it's something that I would love to see other people get into. Here's a great shot of the sailboat, and at the same time, it's a back and forth of me with it. You know, just a ton of fun. Again, I mean, being able to feed the locals and the smiles you put on their faces is just unreal. The high fives at the end of the day when you and your buddy finally get that hogfish you've been after. Teaching others, a crew member that I taught how to spearfish. And I mean, she was through the roof on that one. That's a Nassau grouper, legal to spear in the Bahamas of good size. My other crew member who was already a veteran spearfisher woman, she was doing good, getting solid fish on the boat. And then while you are out there spearfishing, you know, this is, I mean, I hardly even know what this is. That's kind of the fun of it is you get to learn all about the ocean. You know, this is some sort of a jellyfish bloom. Maybe the jellyfish were spawning and there was just 1 million jellyfish here. This is in New Zealand. Great time. And then some of the trophies you can pick up. I mean, these are Kubera jaws, and they're just unreal. Plus all these different shells that you're able to collect. it really is a cool experience. At the end of the day, it's not just a one thing. It's a very, very cool experience to be able to go through, and just unique things that you end up seeing and finding. Um, sometimes sea life comes up to you. The sea turtle came up to me. Yeah, it's all a good time. But that's pretty much going to wrap it up on my end here. I hope I didn't drift off too far. I hope I gave everybody a good idea of what I'm doing, and a good idea of what you could be doing as well.
Hey, Dan, this is Joy.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
Joy.
awesome pictures. I just love your photo display. Amazing. We have a couple of questions. One was, what kind of boat are you on? I think it's a Beneteau, right?
It is. Yep. I am on a 1984 Beneteau, ideally. Beautiful boat. Only thing I didn't have was a swim platform. A swim platform is great for spearfishing. That's just what I'll say on that one. And for sure, anyone else who has questions, or Joy, whoever wants to take it away with the questions.
I have one more question that I have on the thing. I want to know a little bit more about ciguatera. I think you suffered from that once, didn't you?
I did. I did a whole podcast on it where I went over everything. And I'll just say here right now, it is a complicated subject. It is not cut and dry, but there is a lot of misinformation out there about it.
Okay.
If you're interested in learning more about it, please go to my podcast, check it out. I will actually, right now while I'm talking, I will put down my various social media links. If you guys enjoyed this webinar as well, feel free to subscribe or share or whatever it takes here. But here are my different links, as well as the podcast if you want it.
Good.
So what other questions could I answer for anybody, or can we share video so I can hear it from them directly?
I'm not seeing any more questions. Has anybody got any more questions for Dan? He pretty much covered a lot of stuff, so then answered it as he went along too.
I tried to be comprehensive. Well, I'll give people a second, but as well. So as I was writing up the show notes for this seminar, I ended up writing basically a little spearfishing guide, an introduction to spearfishing, that'll go over all of this. So it'll be a little bit more in depth, but I'm gonna put up my email address on here real quick. And if any of you would like a copy of that, shoot me an email. I'm sure I'll do a post on it and make it public at some point. But there is my email address. Feel free to just send, hey, I'd like the show notes, or I'd like the spearfishing guide. I'd be more than happy to send it to you. And that'd be a really good place. I have good references on it as well for finding rules and regulations and kind of going back over things. Spearfishing can be a little daunting from the very beginning.
Dan, this is Joan.
Joan?
And I'm looking at the one more question, fishing under boat and anchor, from Debbie Coleman.
Yes. Yes, so good question, Debbie. Specifically, actually, fish at your anchor. I learned this while going out in Little Center consoles in New Zealand. One guy said every time he would get in the water, he would go dive his anchor first. When you put your anchor down, you're disturbing, the bottom. You're kind of putting up some sediments and whatnot. The fish come in, and it's kind of cool, as long as it's, as long as you're not landing on any coral and like that, you're kind of helping to keep things moving along on the bottom there by stirring it up a little bit. So that'll attract the small fish, which will attract the bigger fish. So I recommend diving on those. As well, diving under your boat at anchor. There are some anchorages you can do it at. The Bahamas is a great example of that, where I don't go take the dinghy. I just go underneath my boat. I'm thinking of like the Berry Islands, and there's a lot of good spots through there. Really, any spot where there isn't too much traffic, where there isn't too many other people, you'll have the fish stocks big enough to support the fish that you want, and they won't be decimated, as well as just swim over to wherever there's some reef. Some reef and current are the two biggest things that you guys all want to be looking for. And that's where you'll find the fish, for sure.
Well, Dan, thank you very much for that. I want to make one comment before I turn it to Joy, and that this has been live streamed to YouTube, and it will be available on YouTube. And all the comments or links to your email address, we can put it there in the comments on YouTube. We will also send that out to everyone who's attended to all their email addresses, so they know how to get a hold of you or to get a copy of your paper, if that helps. And at that, I'm going to
Perfect.
turn this over to Joy. I'm going to take and share the screen so she can finish up the presentation. And Dan, thank you.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. It was awesome. I'm cruising, so I'm in San Carlos, and if you can hear the music behind me, I've got the Mexican music. I'm in a restaurant, and they allowed me to set up here so I could get internet. I just want to say just a little bit about Seven Seas Cruising Association, just for a minute here before we leave. Basically, we'd really like you to join Seven Seas Cruising Association. It's been around for a long, long time. We're moving into the next millennium, so that we're putting out a lot of webinars. Joan, who was just on, is really the boss of that. She's been doing an awesome job of getting all these webinars on. Membership is $75 a year for one person and $35 for an additional person. You can go to ssca.org/join us and do it quite easily there. Dan's one of our recently joining members, whatever. And I think he's got quite a bit of experience, having met SSCAers before this, and got a lot of information from them, learned some from some really experienced people. I think you went to some luncheons and marathon, you said, and learned a lot from the camaraderie and the kind of information you get at these little luncheons and get-togethers. And so I think it's a real viable organization, and hope you will consider to join if you're not already members. And with that, I think we're going to shut down.
Thank you all.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Have a good night.